feels kind of empty in here today, but we have a quorum, so welcome to the Thursday, July 25th Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting. And we will first start out with public announcements.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
All right, with that, moving on, we will, agenda item number 1, approval of the prior MAPC meeting minutes from June 20th.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Warren, a second by Mr. Green, and a comment by Mr. Klossmeyer.
Yeah, they have me neither present or absent, but I was here that day.
Really?
So you say. For sure.
I know I blend in the woodwork, but that's okay.
I think we found why Joe was listed as both.
And I noticed that Joe Johnson and Rob
No, but he was here.
He was here, not here.
What?
Says I am.
Joe Johnson is both absent and present. So I
Oh,
believe
I see
we
that
substituted
now.
Klossmeyer, Joe Johnson.
State.
Okay, so
Just
Joe
in case.
Johnson was here.
No,
He wasn't.
Joe Johnson wasn't present.
Stain.
You're gonna abstain.
I abstain as well.
Mr. Hartman's gonna abstain. But Mr. Klossmeyer was here, so he's not gonna abstain.
That's correct.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries 11-0-2. Did I get that right? Roll.
You're 1 for 1.
Agenda item number 2, item number 21, sub 2019 00030, step final plat for townhomes at Reed's Cove, second edition. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take this item on consent.
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Mr. Warren, a second by Mr. Blick. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 13-0. Agenda item number 3-1, VAC 2019 0004, city vacation of two 10-foot utility easements to allow site improvements for a convenience store. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take that item on consent. Item number 3.3, what happened to 3.2? Okay, item number 3.3, VAC 2019-00018, city vacation of a portion of Reserve A EPC Real Estate Group. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take this item on consent. Item number 3.4, VAC 2019-00019, city vacation of a portion of Hanley Street right-of-way related to the 1996 relocation of McLean Boulevard. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the case?
Madam Chair, I move for approval of 3.1, 3.3, and 3.4.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Joe Johnson, a second by Mr. Florence. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 13-0. Agenda item number 4.1, CUP 2019-00019 and ZON 2019-00025, City CUP Amendment to CUP DP 248 on property generally located on the east side of 127th Street South and approximately 1/4 mile north of East Kellogg. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case?
Yep.
Okay, we will hear the case. Agenda item number 4.2, ZON 2019-22, zone change.
Had a staff question on that one.
This case. Dave, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, it's a real simple one. In the staff report, it references a 60-foot frontage on there, and then when you look at the site diagram, it shows a 50-foot. Is it 50 or 60?
This was, the site plan shows the same project this owner did over on Doris Street. And if you noticed, caught it on the site plan, it's the same layout, same plot plan. He got me the wrong site plan that had it marked with the Doris Street information,
Okay.
is
Thank you.
what it is.
Agenda item number 4.3, ZON 2019-00027, city zone change from SF5 to LC. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we will take that item on consent.
Motion to approve 4.2 and 4.3.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Blick and a second by Mr. Klossmeyer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 13-0. And non-public hearings are agenda item number 5, so we'll go back to agenda item number 4 and 4.1. And we have Dave up to present.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dave Earhart with planning staff. This is a request to both rezone the parcel in question, which is outlined here on the aerial. You can see it's currently zone GO. We're on the east side of 127th Street. Here's the Turnpike and Kellogg further to the south. It's within the CUP, the Meadowland Commercial CUP, which actually covers all the way up here to the off-ramp off of 96 coming off the Turnpike where it intersects with 127th Street. It comes all the way down and then includes other lands further east of 96 along the north side of Kellogg. That's all within that CUP. This request only deals with the parcel in question outlined here. You can see the aerial. It's presently undeveloped. There's Other than a lot of trees, there's not a lot going on here. The request is to rezone it to general commercial. The stated purpose was to accommodate the development of the property as a self-storage complex. The general commercial under the zoning code would allow that to occur without all of the additional stipulations within the supplementary use regulations. However, it would also require an amendment to the CUP to accommodate that same use. After evaluation and looking at everything going on, and they're also asking for 2 billboards. There's currently one right now located roughly at that location that faces along the turnpike as you're going south. And they're asking for the ability to replace that one and also put another one, and we talked about that within the CUP amendment, primarily to restrict its usage, also to face only the turnpike and to be located more at the west end of the property, closer to 127th Street. Our recommendation within the staff report is to approve the rezoning as well as the CUP amendment. We're restricting the usage of the parcel to just the self-storage complex, and then also accommodating the additional billboard. Talked at length with J.R. Cox about that. By rezoning it to GC, what they're requesting would be consistent with the sign code within the city, both regarding total frontage. We are recognizing that the existing billboard that's on the property, and I've got a picture I can show you that, that billboard right there is grandfathered. Under the current rules within the sign code, if they were requesting to build that brand new, it would not be permitted because it's too close to 96. I'm actually on 96 taking this picture. Illegally parked, but that's neither here nor there. And you can see I'm on the bridge right over the turnpike. But they're asking to upgrade that to a more modern billboard facility. And then the other one would be located much further to the west. That's looking west from the site. We're looking at what's across 127th Street. There's really nothing in this area that exists right now. And here I'm again on 96 looking back at the property. This is the small tip of land that really kind of abuts the right-of-way of 96. The only call I had from anybody on this request was to assure that if a billboard was constructed, it would not face 96. And so at this location, it would be kind of hard to really see anything along there. And so our recommendation is for approval, as I said. We're talking about allowing the self-storage, restricting it to that. Also are restricting it to 2 billboards. One, replace the grandfathered facility, and then a second one that would be in really kind of this western 150 feet or so width of the parcel as it, and the site, the billboard would have to be faced such that it's only visible from the turnpike. So I know that the applicant's agent is here. Would note that the current language within the CUP kind of implies that the intended use of this parcel would be more likely residential. And I think they're asking to possibly modify something to retain some of those other uses in the back. We were not interested in, and that's why the language was restricting it only to the self-storage, because we were not interested in opening up the entire usage of the parcel to all the GC uses. This is, and I think we've talked about in the staff report, 127th Street's not going to get much improvement beyond what's there, as you see in the picture right now. It will not go on further south. It will not tie into Kellogg. Actually, this goes south and ends up in the KDOT storage yard across on the south side of the turnpike, but it will not connect to Kellogg as we understand it at all. So be happy to answer any questions you've got.
From the commission, Mr. Foster.
I'm a little curious. Normally when something's grandfathered in and it comes in, and you mentioned it would be a new sign at the same location, is that correct?
Yeah, under the rules, they're able to modify and enlarge a grandfathered sign and bring it up to current standards in the code. So they could do that, yeah.
Not like uses that the new regs kick in on it, and they can do that.
Yeah, and the intent of this is not to necessarily accommodate and treat it like it's no longer grandfathered. We're simply allowing them to modify and upgrade under the grandfather rights, kind of what the court history in Kansas has talked about when you got those kind of issues going on.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission? Mr. Florence?
Yeah, and you said that JR didn't have a problem with the fact that, if I can remember right, you can't put a billboard within, what is it, 300 feet or 600 feet of
It's
96?
660 feet of the right of way of 96, yeah. And but this one that's there, which sits about right at that location, was built before 96 came in this way, all the way down, and also predated everything. So it's there and grandfathered.
Yeah, but I was referring to the new one.
Oh, the new one will be over here, and it will be 660 feet away from the right of way of 96.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you, Dave. If agent or applicant could please step forward, and you will have, if you'll state your name and address, you'll have 10 minutes, please.
Okay. Kirk Miller, I'm the agent, address 117 East Louis. This is a difficult piece of property because it only has the one access off of 127th, and you have to cross a bridge that's not adequate to get to it. The problem with that is that bridge is in the 100-year floodplain. So you don't have, during high storms, an opportunity to get across to this property. They had already drawn up some plans to put some apartments on it. That was what they originally wanted to do. And I said, let's sit down and take a look at this and kind of go over it with a few people. And the fire department said, you can't do that because you don't have access with the 100-year floodplain. So it's like, okay, then what can we do? He said, anything that's not occupied by people. That's why the storage unit came about. The thought of some self-storage is because it's one of the few things that can actually be done. That and billboards. Warehousing is also something that we could probably do. So what we're really wanting is, right now it has geo zoning. And we would like the opportunity to do warehousing or self-storage. And to do the self-storage without it being occupied, we need to be geo. And Dave put in there some restrictions, but the restrictions with that self-storage got rid of the requirement for it being occupied by some maintenance person. So we're good with that. I mean, we're fine with what he has as far as the restrictions for self-storage. But we would also like to maintain basically kind of what's allowed right now with the geo, even though we can't do anything with it right now as far as any of those geo uses because of the issues with occupancy. But you never know what's going to happen. This to the west of us, on the other side of 127th, big parcel of land that goes all the way over to Zelta, and it's someday, if the family that owns that decides they want to do something, there may be a road that's brought all the way over to 127th, and then we'd actually have access. And their ultimate plan was to do apartments. So we would still like to keep the apartments as an option, and the CUP had some restrictions on the apartments, and we're fine with those restrictions. Basically, we'd like to kind of keep what we've got, and then maybe just add the self-storage with the self-storage restrictions, and add warehousing, because I think that's another possible use we could do out there. But then we'd want the geo zoning, but kind of restrict it to we'd want the GC zoning, but restrict it to those geo uses, plus those other two uses we were looking at. Plus the billboards, because they got do something with the property. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Flick.
Mr. Miller, is there any additional state permitting that you have to do for having a billboard on this site, this location? And is there any zoning requirements that they have to have also for that billboard?
Well, the zoning, the GC zoning will let us do the billboard. And I guess JR's kind of said we're okay with the second. He's the expert on, I'm not an expert on billboards.
Okay, that's what I was just
But
wondering.
if JR says we can do it, then I think we're probably pretty good.
Great, thank you.
Other questions from the commission? Mr. Green, did you have a question?
Working on one.
Okay.
I'm kind of the same way, but this may be a joint question for staff. The changes that are not allowed under the staff report right now are basically there because the fire department says that they can't get access to it, so therefore, could we basically open up the uses that are not allowed now? If a point in the future came where the fire department did have access, could that be an automatic approval?
Well, I think what, keep in mind what Kirk is telling you is that the reason that they're not interested in uses, it's just outside, in the low spot right here is the bridge that doesn't lend itself well. And so what you end up with is there's no access uses on this parcel. The fire department's not interested in because of the limited access. The only way in is 127th Street. And there's nothing else going into that area. And they qualify that as not accessible apparently. And they don't want people living.
Right.
But if you go other uses of warehousing, and I'm not sure. Scott, you want to weigh in on that?
I think staff is fine with what Kirk has said in terms of the existing GO uses plus warehousing. That just was not requested in the application.
That's what you're looking for, Kirk?
Yes.
Question.
Mr. Richardson.
Well, it's a staff question. Can we do that without re-advertising it?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else from the audience that would like to speak on this case? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for action.
What would the wording need to be to get the changes needed that Kirk would like?
I think probably approve, subject to what's in the staff report, plus the general office uses allowed in the existing CUP plus warehousing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Mr. Warren, a second by Mr. Joe Johnson. Having a hard time talking today. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries 13-0. All right, let's move on to non-public hearing items, and we have Mary up here to present.
All right, well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. You have before you two cases regarding the CIP. The first case is DER 2019 number 7 for the city of Wichita, and we have DER 2019 8 for Sedgwick County. So your job today is to determine if the CIPs presented are in conformance with the comp plan. This is a yes or no vote. In each of these cases is voted on separately. Your packet includes a little handout I did that has the goals of the comp plan. If you remember, it looked like this. And just to help, this is just a guide to help you in determining if this meets those goals. And so there are two presentations today, but I'm going to do them in opposite order because I don't see our presenter for the city. But I'll invite Jim Weber and Valerie Castor up here from Sedgwick County to present on case number 2019, number 8 for Sedgwick County. And so, let's see here. Yep, I'm gonna. going backwards. Okay. One of you guys help me find this? Sorry. Oh, I think,
I'm gonna take the spot
I
in
think
case
so.
Elliot shows up.
That's
I'm
okay.
already here.
Okay. This is number 8. Yeah, sorry about that. Is that your first slide?
I think it's the second one. That's okay.
There it is. Okay. It's all yours.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Weber. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for Sedgwick County. And Valerie will do part of this. She's our interim Director of Facilities for Sedgwick County. And so we'll just get going. We'll do the buttons. Just give you a quick update. So CIP is part of our regular budget process. We are well into that process. We met with the Advanced Plans Committee 2 weeks ago. They are supportive of this plan. We've presented the budget. We've had our first public hearing. This is the 25th. We're talking to you. Our second public hearing is on August the 1st, and the full budget and the CIP is expected to be adopted on August the 7th. We'll talk about roads and bridges real quick. So again, we have about 600 miles of roads, about 600 bridges, about 13,000 signs in our system. We're going to break this down into 4 main categories of projects: things that maintain the system, things that enhance the system, expansion projects, and quality of place projects. So we think things that maintain the system are regular preventative maintenance projects, replacement of infrastructure with like infrastructure. So if we tear out a 2-lane road and put a nicer 2-lane road in. And replacements may include minor enhancements. So if we were doing that, we added a left turn lane, something, that would be all part of a maintenance project. And most bridges, we don't build very many new bridges that never existed, so most bridge replacements are actually maintenance for the system. Enhancement projects would typically relieve bottlenecks, improve safety, or add capacity. Expansion projects would add significant capacity, so that would be going from a 2-lane to a 4 or 5-lane facility, for example, where they create new routes. And quality of place, we're talking about traditional bike ped projects or maybe things that deal with park and public space infrastructure. So our goals, our kind of operating goals, are to do preventative maintenance on our roads every 6 years. So to do that, we'd need to treat about 210 lane miles of road per year. And we think generally bridges are good for 50 years. So every year we need to be looking at trying to replace 12 bridges a year. We do some by contract, and we try to do about half a dozen a year with county forces. Smaller bridges we'll replace with precast box culverts, for example. So our maintenance projects, R134 is the place we got to buy miscellaneous right away and do utility relocation. So we got $1 million over it's a 5-year CIP. The city will be talking to you about a 10. We do a 5-year. Our preventive maintenance, R175, this is the big one. $47.5 million over the next 5 years. This is the overlays and the seals and the crack sealing and those kinds of things that we do. This is what we're really hitting every 6 years. We try to hit everything with. Miscellaneous drainage projects, we got $600,000 a year for that. This is where material comes from for the smaller bridges that we do in-house. Culvert pipe, we might hire contractors to do a drainage thing that's, again, these are kind of associated with the road, but drainage things that we need to do. We have a separate project for traffic control, and so every other year, we're refreshing the striping on our roads. Our signal parts and pieces come out of this, various miscellaneous traffic things. Maintenance of the bridge system, the current CIP that you've seen, we have 4 major bridge repair projects. They total a little less than $9 million, and we're looking at, if you're familiar with these, Ridge Road over the Arkansas River. It's a pretty good bridge, but needs some work. Bentley Road over the Arkansas River, that's one of the very infrequent crossings out in the western part of the county of the Arkansas River. That's 151st, if you think of it that way. 63rd Street South over the Arkansas River. We just recently identified that as one that probably needs some major maintenance work. And then Zoo Boulevard Bridge over the MS Mitchell floodway. We have 25 actual total bridge replacements in the plan, $27 million worth, for a total of 29 bridge projects. So we're not quite hitting that. We'd have 30 if we were actually doing our 6 a year. But some of these, one of them is over in the Nenasko, and it's $4 million by itself. Enhancement projects, we have a project on 135th Street West. Mays has an industrial park that's firing up out there north of 53rd Street. So we have a project to do about a half mile out there up to an industrial standard to support that. R350 is a project where we used to do, you've heard me talk about it, we used to do cold mix roads. We had a program where every commissioner got to essentially pick 1 mile a year that we would go out and take a township gravel road and we turn into a cold mix paved road. That's kind of morphed over time. We've got it back to every other year. Now we're not picking township roads. This one is, we've got about 150 miles of cold mix roads and they really need to be a little extra attention, more than we can do with major maintenance. And so we'll have $1.5 million a year to go in and try to do something with our existing cold mix or our county gravel road, $1.5 million a year for that. 351 is a kind of a major improvement. It's a partnership with Hayesville School District, 55th and Meridian. If you're familiar with that, at Campus High School, we've got good pavement on and turn lanes on the Meridian, but thought they had traffic issues at the intersection, but they're really back to the east in front of the high school. So we have a 50-50 project going with them on the pavement, and then as we've been working on it, it's come to the point where it's almost to trigger the need for a traffic signal there, so we're going to go ahead and do that. That should be a good project around the school. These next two, Ridge Road is a good solid road going north from the city of Wichita, but it's doesn't really have shoulders on it. It's got steep ditches. There have been some traffic accidents up there, some issues. So these two projects would, over a period of time, we would add shoulders and regrade the ditches and it'd be a safety enhancement up there. But the main pavement is not really going to change. Expansion projects, you've heard us talk about the Northwest Bypass. We're on our, I think, third agreement with KDOT where we partner to buy right-of-way. Many of you are familiar with the protective overlay that exists out there to protect the route. This year is our 2020 is our last year of our current 5-year agreement, so we're working with them on a next agreement. And so what we've done is we've budgeted in the $325,000 we need for the current agreement, and then we've gone ahead and put a placeholder in for another $325,000 for the next 4 out years, just so we don't have to go find it later when we get the next deal worked out. Quality of place, I think you're probably familiar with the aviation pathway that's worked its way up from Derby to 47th and Oliver over into Oaklawn area. We had a piece where we had a right-of-way issue across where the machinist union owns some property. We had to pull that out of the project. We're working with them. We're about to get the right-of-way worked out. That first 2 phases were 80% federal funds. This one we'll do totally out of pocket, but this is coming along. We should be able to get that done. So 5-year summary, total county expenditure on roads and bridges is $93 million. 83.3% is going to maintain the road and bridge system, about 15% for enhancement projects, 1% for road expansion on road and bridge system, and a little bit, 0.3% for the quality of place projects. You have a goal in the community investments plan to preserve and maintain a safe, cost-effective, and reliable transportation system that strategically supports economic growth, vitality, and quality of life aspirations in our community. We think Goal 1's been met by our plan. The plan, and as the data gets updated, notes that our county infrastructure is in good condition. And again, our proposed CIP proposes to invest over 83% in maintenance of the existing system. I have a second goal to improve and increase the movement of goods, people, and information with better connectivity and mobility options in the community. And this one we think is also met. We're making investments in bike ped facilities. We're continuing investments in long-range planning for the Northwest Bypass to prepare for the future. I'll let Valerie talk about facilities projects.
Hi, my name is Valerie Castor. I'm Interim Director of Facilities and the Project Services Manager. Our CIP committee every year gets different CIP requests for projects, which we review and organize and rack and stack, as we call it. We have 4 different categories. Category 1 is high priority and or consistent with existing long-term preventative maintenance schedule. These are just images from a couple of our projects that are category 1. The top 2 are from an expansion for a waiting room that's too small for adult res. Bottom left is, as I'm sure you know, the county courthouse, and that's to represent a potential project within that space, and then our continuing replacement, repair of the tornado sirens. So this is a list of our Category 1 items that made it over the next 5-year plan. Our main ones that are slated for 2020 is money for the flood control system and maintenance repair for the Wichita Valley Center Flood Control Project, which I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. We also do roofs and parking lots on a rotating basis based upon when they need to be done. As I mentioned, the outdoor warning device system and the waiting room you just saw, which is the adult res, which is receiving about 4 times as many people in it at a time than it was designed for. This is Category 2. The need is not as urgent, but it should be funded with the short-term horizon. And you can see a couple of pictures of some carpet areas that we need to replace at the county health building. Excuse me. And the other 2 buildings are pavilions and shelters out at our parks that are kind of getting a little old and worn. So we don't have any of these slated for 2020 as they're Category 2. The household hazardous waste facility expansion has been listed, and they're basically also doubling their income of people and product. The facility was built in 2002, and since then it's tripled its quantity of hazardous waste that it processes from 227 with a customer increase of 227 annually to 10,268. They also received 396,500 pounds of hazardous waste in 2002, and in 2018 that is increased to 1,197,000 pounds of hazardous waste. We also have on the list the 2 shelters I mentioned, the pavilion at Lake Afton Park and Cottonwood Shelter. And again, that's just finishes and maintaining our assets. Category 3 is items that are on the horizon with a lower sense of urgency. Here you can see a picture of the Boundless Play, if you're familiar with it, out at Sedgwick County Park. There's also a picture of where JRBR used to be out at Lake Afton Park. And then we've had a lot of requests for dog parks recently, so a random picture of dogs, 'cause that makes every presentation better. So on our horizon, we have replacing the rubber base at Boundless Play. We've got some gazebos at Sedgwick County Park, dog parks, fitness courses, things like that at our parks, water hookups, and the EMS admin building carpeting that needs to be replaced. Category 4 are watch list items, and these are usually just projects that require more information. The scope needs to be a little bit more solidified, or we just need as a committee to have more information to move forward with it. And we've had a number of requests that go onto that list. As you can see, Regional Forensic Science Center DNA Lab, the county election building, replace EMS Post 1, construct new EMS in the west, JRF remodel project, construct EMS garage facility, emergency management room, which is basically an expansion for the 911 call center, it's part of it. And then the Northeast Sedgwick County Parks up for discussion.
And Mr.
Valerie,
Yes,
could you go back 2 screens?
I can try really hard. Here we go.
One more, that one right there.
Mm-hmm.
That was your category that had a lower sense of urgency, I read on there.
Category 3. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a number of those are pushed out to 2024. Are these projects that typically just keep getting pushed back on and on?
No, no, they don't. Once this is approved through budget, what's in 2020 is definite. It's going to happen. Everything else, every year is reevaluated and restructured. And so if something becomes a higher need, it can jump straight to the top of the list. It is not the design or desire to continue to push items out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to finish up? Okay. A request action. Sedgwick County requests that the full MAPC find the proposed 2019 to 2023 capital improvement program to be in conformance with the community investments plan. And can I answer any additional questions?
Questions from the commission? Mr. Warren?
What effect does this plan have on mill levy? Is that calculated in?
Ironically, we took all of our budget slides out of this presentation.
I think the way to answer that is that, I'll speak for the road and bridge stuff. Basically, the funds, the 93 million is not mill levy funds. It's federal money, it's bond money, it's local sales tax. The bulk of it is local sales tax for us. In the facilities, and again, we took those slides out to shorten it up. Yeah, it could have an impact on mill levy because many of them would be funded out of mill levy. Some of them get bonded, the bonds get repaid out of mill levy. But the finance people, track all that, and they do long-range forecasting and try to figure out where we need to be. And since it's within the whole budget process, then this gets looked at along with what happens with the mill levy and the operating budget for the whole county.
If commissioners decided that either that these requests and plans raise the mill levy too much, or the income coming in because of growth and other factors wasn't there, what's the process for paring down these projects?
I think that the short answer is that it's all attached to the budget, and they're doing the hearings right now and making the overall decision about where to set the mill levy. And they would provide feedback to the manager that says, you know what, we can't bear this much. We need to, they might direct, take these projects out, or go back to the manager and say, we need to get the mill levy down to this. What can we take out?
Okay, thank you.
Other
Again,
questions
it's
from
all
the
integrated. The idea is that you end up with a budget, and when it gets published, it's one book that's got all of this in it.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you. So I'd like for us to go ahead, since we have to take action on these. Motion by Mr. McKay, a second by Mr. Blick.
Yeah. Kathy.
Now any public comment?
It is a non-public hearing item.
It is a non-public hearing, Joe. So, no. Any other discussion? Seeing all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 13-0.
All right, well, thank you.
I might just comment on Mr. Johnson's comment. There is a public hearing on this, and it occurs at the county commission.
Thank you. That really was my question.
Yeah, that's the answer.
All right. Now we'll move on to case number DER 2019-07 for the city of Wichita, and that would be Mark Manning from the Budget Office.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, let me apologize. I kind of lost track of time. I was in a meeting, and next thing I know, my phone's lighting up, and I really apologize. It was disrespectful, and I shouldn't have done that. The good news is I got a little fitness test because I literally jogged over, and I had to stop about halfway in the middle of our parking lot. I didn't realize I was that far out of shape, so so I got a little fitness test today. Let me go over the CIP for the city of Wichita. Just click on the mouse.
This way.
Oh, wrong button.
There we go. Okay.
Wrong button.
Left.
And a lot of you have heard this numerous times, so I'll go over some of these slides relatively quickly. Obviously, feel free to stop me if you have any specific questions. City of Wichita uses a prioritization model, not unlike what the county does, maybe a little bit more empirical, but similar to what they do in determining what projects should be included in our CIP. So I will review those today, and then I'll talk a little bit about our funding capacity and the projects. I'll keep it at a pretty high level, though. As you know, the CIP process each year kind of evolves. We use the last year's CIP as a basis for the next year's. And basically, the takeaway from this graphic is each CIP has roughly 200 projects. Some get completed, so they fall out. Some get unprioritized, kind of like what the question you were asking. Not very many, but occasionally, and there's reasons why. Then we add in new projects, and then the bulk of the projects carry forward. So there's a lot of influences as we develop our CIP. I'd point your attention to the upper left-hand corner. That's one of the most important one. The Community Investments Plan plays a critical role in the development of our CIP. City council mission and goals obviously is important to us as well. Our prioritization score, again, that's from an empirical process that we've developed to prioritize each project. And finally, we use a lot of citizen feedback in our CIP, and I'll kind of hit on all those in a piecemeal process as I go through this. Our prioritization model, I think I talked to you a little bit about last year. Again, it's weighed towards the community investments plan, and that's not by accident, of course. But we've got a variety of criteria, and they're aggregated into 4 areas. One, community investments plan is roughly 20%. Consistency with council planning processes primarily is 25%. Financial considerations is 30%, and then a variety of other considerations is 25%. And within that, there are sub-areas in which we look at the alignment to each one of those. So overall themes on our CIP, and again, I won't dive too deep. I could if you have specific questions, but I'll keep it pretty high level. We are increasing spending on roads and specifically spending on road maintenance. Now, why are we doing that? For a couple of reasons. Number one is taking care of what we have, which is one of the top priorities of the community investments plan. But maybe as important to us, that is probably, other than public safety, the number one thing that we hear from residents: fix our streets. So we're pouring a bunch of money into road maintenance. We are decreasing freeway spending. I think I mentioned this last year. When we complete East Kellogg out to K96, which I think will be later on this year, early into next year, the only other freeway project City Wichita has in our 10-year CIP is a little bit of right-of-way and planning money for the North Junction. Other than that, there are no freeways in our 10-year plan. Instead, we'll use the local sales tax dollars and focus those on, again, roads and bridges. Our CIP is considerably larger than last year, and that's due almost exclusively to water and sewer utilities. We have 2 huge projects: the BNR Biological Nutrient Removal Project and the Northwest Water Treatment Plant Project. Those are about $900 million. We had smaller amounts in the prior CIP, but they're fully loaded into this CIP. And finally, just FYI, there's 2 new categories we added this year: public safety and heavy equipment. Some of you may remember that you haven't seen those in the pie charts in previous years. So this chart's pretty messy, but the takeaway is that water and sewer utility is over half of our CIP. Again, huge projects in that area. And then you can see arterials is about a quarter, and everything else makes up the other quarter. Arterials, of course, is expanded because of all the special assessment projects that we have as well. Total, our CIP is about $2.4 billion over 10 years. Last year, it was about a $1.8 billion over the 10-year period. So again, the water and sewer is significantly increasing our total CIP. So where do the dollars come from? Well, if half the projects are water and sewer projects, obviously half the revenue is coming from the water and sewer utilities, and you can see that on this chart. But the other slice that's most important to most of the people I present this to is the slice at the 9 o'clock position. That's GO at large. That's our property tax funded portion of our CIP. We do levy a separate property tax levy for our CIP. We're a little bit different from the county there. And I can tell you that that levy is projected at 7.5 mills, which is identical to what it was last year. In other words, we project a constant and stable mill levy to fund our CIP for the next 10 years. This is just focused only on GO at large, which again is property tax funded. And takeaway here is that arterials and public safety is where most of our property tax dollars go, with, you know, sizable amounts in other areas, but the bulk of our money is going towards arterials and public safety. And again, what do our residents tell us are the most critical priorities? Public safety, roads. So that's kind of reflected in that chart there. Financial capacity may not be quite as interesting to you, so I'll skip through these a little bit faster. But this is the main slide that we always show the city council. They are concerned about what's the appropriate level of debt. And we do issue a lot of debt at the city. I think we're probably debt financed a lot more than the county does. But we issue a lot of debt. But debt isn't necessarily bad, but too much debt is bad. So the question is, what is too much debt? So the measure that we use is what portion of our income are we spending on debt? And we want that portion to be less than 2/3 or less than 66%, which is the blue line on that chart. So in our model, as long as the line is below the blue line, that is within acceptable range. Now, I would tell you in a perfect world, we'd probably like to see that flat at about 50%. We'd probably like to cash fund about 50% of our projects and debt fund about 50%. That's the a good mix between intergenerational equity and the advantages of debt financing and cash. You can see we're below that now. It is true that we will go above that line, we believe, and then we'll moderate back towards that 50% kind of target area. So takeaway is, yes, sir.
General at-large debt, does that include special assessments for
No.
that?
Yeah, no, sir, it does not. That's a great point. And I will point out the city has about $1 billion worth of debt out right now. That's a big number. A lot of people get pretty nervous about that. The portion I'm talking about on this slide is GEO at large, which is 5% of that number. It's about $45 million. That's all we got out right now. Now, special assessment debt, since you ask, is about another $150 million. It's a sizable portion of our debt portfolio. But yeah, it's not on this slide here. The only other debt I'll talk about is local sales tax. We do have local sales tax debt that we've issued in the past for Kellogg Freeway projects. In the future, as we minimize freeway expenditures and maximize road expenditures, that will probably allow us to cash finance a lot more improvements. And so you can see our coverage ratio, we think, will go considerably higher. Again, our benchmark here is 110%, which is the red line down at the bottom. I think that's red. You can see we're way above that. So in other words, our LST debt is easily manageable, and it will go, the coverage ratio will go up in the future, which means we'll be issuing even less LST debt in the future. So let's go to the two most important slides probably for you, and these are the quantification of how our CIP aligns with the Community Investments Plan. I'd like to thank Scott for helping us with these calculations here. You can see about 45% of our entire CIP goes to the #1 overall spending priority of the Community Investments Plan. That's actually a little higher than last year. I think it was maybe 43% last year, if my memory is serving correctly. I will point out we're a little different in the county. You know, we have an airport, we have water sewer utility, we're considerably larger. So that kind of skews our percentages a little bit towards the expand area. But again, most of the expands are special assessment projects, which are a sizable portion of our CIP. Some of our water utility projects fall into that category. But the bulk of our locally funded projects fall into priority #1 for the most part. So let's look at the spending area priorities. You can see 83% of our CIP falls into the very high overall spending area priorities of the Community Investments Plan. So I would think that those would show that we are aligned pretty closely. And I'll also tell you that chart, if I remember right last year, I think that 83% was only 77%. So like I said, I think the city, and I think I said this last year, has done a considerably better job over the last 3 or 4 years of aligning to what used to be the comp plan, what's now the Community Investments Plan. So briefly, let me just wrap up with a few specific highlights on projects that you'll see in the CIP. This shows road maintenance. Takeaway here is the red line's a lot higher than the blue line. The blue line is what I would have showed you last year, and the red line is higher than that. In all, we're going to spend about $29 million more over the 10-year period than what we thought we were last year. And the base is roughly $100 million. So we're going to spend $29 million more on a $100 million base, which is a 30% increase, roughly. Again, huge area of emphasis for the city of Wichita. Aquatics, we're going to rebuild our swimming pools, so we'll have 6 swimming pools and a variety of splash pads. That was a big deal to the city council based on the aquatics master plan. So that'll transform our aquatics offerings. We just built the advanced learning library course, so phase 2 of that was to evaluate our branches and determine what's the appropriate use and location of our branches. And so we have $5.3 million in the CIP to renovate some of our branches and kind of structure them more around the services that we believe our citizens want, primarily around technology. Public safety, I mentioned, large category, almost $100 million. That will fund the rebuilding of 4 of our police stations and 3 of our fire stations, and then the rest of it is for fire trucks and radios and apparatus and things of that nature. Drainage improvements. As you may remember, the stormwater utility, which primarily funds drainage improvements, had virtually no capacity for extra projects until about 2 years ago when the city council adjusted the ERU fees. That has provided capacity, and we believe that we could fund up to $36 million in drainage improvements in this CIP. What's our #1 drainage priority consistently at City of Wichita? It's Dry Creek in East Wichita. The what I call Bleckley Street or by the VA, if you're familiar with that area. Don't know exactly what the improvements are going to look like now or what they're going to cost, but takeaway is that the city does have an amount, maybe not the right amount, but an amount for drainage improvements at what we consider our top drainage priority. Again, water and sewer, I mentioned, we have about $880 million for two huge projects that will, transform our treatment and on both the wastewater and the water side. Finally, relatively small potatoes, but I'll mention it also. City of Wichita has long included public art in our CIP. We have aesthetic improvements that are embedded in our projects based on our design guidelines approved by the Design Council, and that's not even shown on this slide, but that's, several millions of dollars a year. On top of that, we work with the Design Council specifically to allocate funding for specific public art improvements. We want to improve that process, and we've tried to the last couple of years. So this year, what we're trying to do is we're going to put a specific targeted amount of money in the CIP, and that'll increase transparency and predictability for both the city and the Design Council, we believe. That targeted amount is proposed at 1.5% of the local funding in the CIP. So the takeaway of everything I just said is the CIP has $8 million over the 10-year period for public art, and again, that's on top of aesthetic funding that's embedded into projects, and it's on top of any other public art funding that has already been previously approved. So the calendar, we of course went to the DABs in June, District Advisory Boards, went to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee on July 9th, visited with the Advanced Plans Committee a couple weeks ago. The city manager actually, the city presented the budget and CIP 2 days ago. On July 23rd, so the City Council has the document that I'm discussing with you today and saw a presentation relatively similar to what I presented to you today. And finally, our adoption of the CIP is scheduled for August 13th, and the city will also have a public hearing on August 6th. The book looks like this. It's about 150-some pages, lots of pictures, lots of text too. It's obviously available on the internet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions on the commission? Mr. Dool.
So if the city in the CIP is going to fund these art projects, who approves the art?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, the way it works is we go to the Design Council with our list of projects, and they identify the ones that have special considerations, i.e. the ones that they think art is applicable to, and then they agree on a dollar amount, and then they take it from there, is my understanding. They coordinate with artists and the design and all that kind of stuff. So the city's
Arts Council.
Design Council, yeah.
Design Council, yeah.
The city's role primarily is just being the funder.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you very much.
Again, I apologize. I won't do it next year. I'll be here 30 minutes early next year.
All right. We will bring it back to the commission for action.
We approve as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Mr. McKay, a second by Mr. Joe Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried 13-0. Moving on to agenda item number 5.3. It looks like Scott's going to talk to us a little bit about the bylaws.
Yes, a month ago, the commission discussed the proposed bylaws. That at the time had recommended a structure where there would be alternative members identified and appointed by the chairman of the Planning Commission to serve as alternates to both the Subdivision Committee and the Advanced Plans Committee. At the discussion on the 20th, the commission directed staff to change the bylaws to just allow the chairman of either the Subdivision Committee or the Advanced Plans Committee to appoint as many members as necessary from the other committee to attend on a temporary basis a meeting of the other subcommittee so that committee could have a quorum. They also directed us to have a discussion with the Subdivision Committee about what particularly the utility advisory members of the Subdivision Committee would think about having items that were presented to a Subdivision Committee meeting that did not have a quorum and therefore could not make a recommendation to the full commission whether those items should come straight to the planning commission with no recommendation from the subdivision committee. At a relatively lengthy discussion about that, but ultimately the subdivision committee recommended that that not be the case, that the subdivision items, if there was no quorum, would then be deferred to the next subdivision committee meeting, so that there could be a recommendation from the subdivision committee on subdivision items. There's also a discussion about the fact that the planning commission would have the ability, if they chose at their next meeting, to have a motion, take a vote that would require a 2/3 majority of the commission to suspend the bylaws and take up the item at the planning commission and forego that recommendation from the subdivision committee. So that is what you have before you today in a recommended set of bylaws, and I'd be glad to answer questions.
Questions from the commission? I guess I just, more than anything, want to make a comment that while I think these changes are needed, my big concern is I don't think that these overall will address the issues with attendance at the meetings, the advanced subdivision committee meetings. I think as we are appointed to serve on the MAPC, that part of that commitment includes serving on one or the other of these committees. And so I'd like to see that we all make a commitment to be at those committee meetings as required. And I'd also encourage the chairs that if there's an issue with people not being able to make those meetings at the times that they're currently being held, that maybe some discussion be held as to when those meetings could be held, and that would allow more participation, because I know it's important that we have participation on these subcommittees. So that was the only comment that I wanted to make. Any other comments, questions? If not, I
Move to
would.
approve the recommendations.
Okay, I have a motion to approve recommendations by Mr. Warren, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 13-0. And with that, we are adjourned.